Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome.
In our top story, Iran is racing towards nuclear breakout. Tensions between Israel and the radical Islamic Republic have reached a new high after Iran's unprecedented direct attack on the Jewish state. The Ayatollahs have repeatedly threatened to wipe Israel off the map, and new information released by the International Atomic Energy Agency shows that Tehran is dangerously close to realizing its nuclear goals. Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, has warned that the hardline Islamic Republic is just weeks away from producing enough enriched uranium to manufacture an atomic weapon. He confirmed that a high-ranking Iranian official disclosed that the regime has all of the components for a weapon of mass destruction. Ali Akbar Salehi, the former head of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, recently said that Tehran has all of the pieces for a nuclear bomb in their hands.
Israel successfully employed the use of highly sophisticated radar-evading missiles to strike Iran's air defense system located near the Natanz nuclear facility. The New York Times reported that the incoming missiles were undetected by Tehran's radar systems. The result sent a strong message to the radical Islamic Republic that Israel is capable of neutralizing Iran's defenses. Satellite images taken after the strike show that Iran's Russian-supplied S-300 missile defense system, stationed at an air base in Isfahan near the heavily fortified nuclear site, was destroyed. Two Iranian officials confirmed that Tehran did not detect any intrusions into its airspace, proving the effectiveness of Israel's military technology. The report noted that the targeted attack was deliberately designed to demonstrate that Iran's nuclear facilities are vulnerable to an Israeli strike.
The U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate passed a $17 billion aid package for Israel. About $5.2 billion will go towards replenishing and expanding Israel's missile defense systems, which have been depleted, defending the Jewish state from thousands of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iranian rockets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying the bill demonstrates strong bipartisan support for Israel and defends Western civilization. He thanked America for its show of solidarity to the Jewish state in its time of need.
Ismail Haniyeh, the political boss of Hamas, met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss the possibility of moving the Iranian-backed terror group's headquarters to Turkey. The Al-Sharq Saudi news channel reported that talks between Ankara and Hamas are underway to transfer the terror organization's political bureau from Qatar to Turkey, a member of NATO. Erdogan is a strong supporter of Hamas's genocidal war against Israel and has repeatedly called for the establishment of a Palestinian state from the river to the sea that would replace Israel. Genocide is nothing new to the Turks. Historians will recall the Turkish Ottoman Empire's systematic murder of more than 1 million Armenian civilians during the First World War. Erdogan told Haniyeh that Israel will pay. Turkey has already implemented strict import restrictions against goods produced in the Jewish state.
Terror leader Mahmoud Abbas has threatened to reevaluate ties with the United States after Washington vetoed a unilateral Palestinian bid for full membership at the United Nations. The Palestinian terror leader railed against Washington for supporting Israel and said that the PA will reconsider its bilateral relations with the United States. Abbas accused Washington of violating international law and accused the Biden administration of reneging on its promises and commitments to the Palestinian people.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has shocked the civilized world by refusing to name the Hamas terror group in his list of organizations that have committed acts of sexual violence during wartime. The UN report, entitled Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, notes that there is evidence of sex crimes perpetrated during the October 7th massacre in Israel. However, Guterres could not bring himself to point the finger of guilt at the Iranian-backed terror group. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz accused the UN chief of standing shoulder to shoulder with the rapists and the murderers of Hamas by refusing to hold the terror group accountable.
The United States has finally recognized that Hamas is the obstacle to peace. The Biden administration recently declared that the Iranian-backed terror group is preventing a ceasefire agreement and acknowledged that Israel has done all it possibly could in the negotiations. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller announced that there's a deal on the table that would achieve much of what Hamas claims it wants, but they have not taken it. Hamas rejected a proposal for a 6-week ceasefire and demanded unreasonable terms that Israel could not agree to. The terror group claims that it no longer holds 40 living hostages which meet the humanitarian conditions clause for release, and is demanding that dozens of bloodthirsty Palestinian terrorists be freed from Israeli prisons in exchange for each Hamas hostage. The return of the remaining 134 hostages remains one of Israel's main objectives in the war against the terror group in Gaza.
In a shocking development, the United States has announced it is planning to sanction a unit of the Israel Defense Forces. Israeli leaders were outraged to learn of the proposed action against the Netzach Yehuda Battalion, which operates in Judea and Samaria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying he has already been working against earlier U.S. sanctions targeting individual Israeli citizens. The premier added that while Israeli soldiers are fighting the monster of terrorism, the intention to sanction a unit of the IDF is a new height of absurdity and a moral low.
The Jewish holiday of Passover was marred by barrages of rocket fire from the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. Jews celebrating the exodus from Egypt in northern Israel were forced to race for bomb shelters as the Lebanon-based terror group fired 35 missiles on their communities. Hezbollah has fired thousands of rockets into the Jewish state since the outbreak of the war on October 7th, prompting the evacuation of dozens of Israeli communities near the Lebanese border.
Anti-Jewish hatred has spiked in the United States, prompting the Anti-Defamation League to sound the alarm over the troubling rise in anti-Semitism in America. The ADL reported that there has been an unprecedented increase in hate crimes, resulting in a 140% spike of attacks on Jews. It noted that since the October 7th Hamas invasion of Israel, there has been an average of 24 attacks on Jews every day. After the Iranian-backed massacre of 1,200 people in Israel, the ADL recorded 8,873 incidents of assaults, harassment, and vandalism against Jews. U.S. college campuses have seen a 321% increase in anti-Semitic attacks, and Jewish students report feeling increasingly unsafe. Rebecca has more on that story.
Yes, Yochanan, universities throughout America have been plagued by violent anti-Israel protests calling for the destruction of Israel and death to the Jews. Columbia University canceled in-person classes, Harvard Yard was temporarily shuttered, and hundreds of violent anti-Israel activists were arrested at New York University and Yale. Jewish students have been attacked on campus by pro-Palestinian mobs, prompting the administrations of several institutions to suspend studies. Jewish students have been instructed to stay home as illegal encampments of violent protesters were erected at dozens of universities throughout America.
In archaeological news, a token from the Second Temple period that was discovered in Jerusalem has been linked to the Passover Pilgrimage Festival. The ceramic insignia was unearthed in 2011 at the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Researchers found the seal with an impression of a clay jug and believe that it was used by Jewish pilgrims as currency to purchase biblical sacrifices more than 2,000 years ago. In 1999, the Jordanian Islamic Waqf used bulldozers to dig underneath the Temple Mount and dumped thousands of tons of earth filled with precious archaeological artifacts as garbage. Israeli authorities took possession of the debris and have been painstakingly sifting through the history-rich earth and cataloging artifacts that prove the Jewish connection to Mount Moriah. Zachi Devera, the co-founder and director of the Temple Mount Sifting Project, explained that the seal dates to the time of the biblical King Herod in the 1st century before the Common Era.
Thousands of Jews flooded the Western Wall Plaza to participate in the biannual priestly blessing, or Birkat HaKohanim. This powerful prayer is recited by the priestly tribe of Kohanim and is publicly recited twice each year during the intermittent days of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, and Passover. The text of this special blessing is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, where God commanded Moses to instruct Aaron to bless the children of Israel with these words. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May his face shine upon you, and may he be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Jews around the world began counting the Omer after the first night of Passover as commanded in Deuteronomy chapter 16. The Bible instructs the children of Israel to count 49 days, or 7 weeks, from the day after Passover until the Feast of the First Fruits, or Shavuot, otherwise known as Pentecost on the Christian calendar. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Rothstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Rothstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Rothstein. She's the CEO and co-founder of Stand With Us. Roz, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our viewers a little about what is Stand With Us.
Stand With Us supports Israel and fights anti-Semitism. So we actually have a dual mission. We work on college campuses and high schools and middle schools to help students, to support them so that they can inspire their peers. We also help with Hasbara issues. People don't understand what's going on in Israel. They hear things and they don't quite get the story. So we are very big on social media. We have had 1.5 billion interactions since October 7th. So there's a lot of people using our information, using our platforms on social media to share with their friends.
So you mentioned October 7th, and I guess everything's changed since then. How has the organization adapted to not just the massive amount of anti-Semitism, but the misinformation coming out about Israel since October 7th?
So we had this organization being built up for 22 years. We're literally on 6 continents, and we're working fast and furiously. And then came October 7th. And each of our departments, and there are 15 departments, I said college, high school, middle school, social media, legal, all of our departments went on steroids. So every single one of them, it's more of the same, but, faster and more furiously, and had to hire extra people because the burden of making sure the stories are accurate that get out there was intensified greatly. So
I get this question a lot, and you probably are better qualified to answer it. Since October 7th, you see people marching down the streets with swastikas saying death to the Jews. You see college campuses where people are saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Hamas flags, ISIS flags. All this is illegal. How is this allowed to happen? Any other minority, if you just change the word Jew to any minority, there would be FBI there, police. What's going on?
Well, you're right. It shouldn't be allowed, and particularly on college campuses, there's a lot of vicious rhetoric. So the question is, why is it being allowed? And that's a very good legal question. That's why our legal department is so important to us. We've actually expanded our legal department because at a certain point, there has to be a red line. It's no longer free speech. It becomes discriminatory, where if the university allows things against one group of people, but certainly wouldn't allow it against another group of people, that's discriminatory. If a professor is treating Jewish students or Israeli students differently in the classroom, that's discriminatory. So that's the red line. In terms of the language and the rhetoric that we hear on the streets, it is frighteningly vicious and very unexpected, but a rapid rise since October 7th that I think surprised everybody. So one would think students would have gone back to their environments and gotten support. Jewish students, Israeli students would have gone back to college campuses and high schools, gotten support from their peers, support from their professors. But it was quite the opposite.
Well, where's the DOJ? Where's the Biden administration in all this? Is this something that they're just ignoring? We saw hearings on Capitol Hill where the heads of these universities are like, they have to take action. Calling for genocide's not enough. But of course, we know that if it wasn't Jews and they were calling genocide for any other people, it would be enough. So what's happening?
But this is precisely why we have an enlarged legal department, because this is wrong. And so university administrations will ignore a lot of things as long as they possibly can, because there's always factions on both sides that are going to place pressure on the university, maybe donors that like things this way or this way. So saying nothing oftentimes suits the university, but in this case of discrimination against Jewish students or Israeli students, or pro-Israel non-Jewish students, pro-Israel Christian students, is absolutely wrong. And that's why we have enlarged our legal department. So at a certain point, this will stop, but we're still in the middle of it. We're still watching this craziness.
Evangelical Christians are amongst our greatest supporters. They've really stepped up since October 7th. What can evangelical Bible-believing Christians do to get more involved with Stand With Us?
They should go to standwithus.com. On the top right, they can register. They can receive action alerts. We're constantly sending out free information that everybody can use. And this is a time that obviously Israel needs that support. And you can support Israel through Stand With Us.
Roz, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I would say that first, thank you. Thank you for your involvement and your love for the state of Israel and the people of Israel. Thank you for your allyship. What you can do is show it. In other words, don't just feel it, but show it. And one way to do that is to follow these action alerts and see how you can get involved. You could write a letter to the editor. You could write a letter to an elected official. There may be all kinds of campaigns going on, and you can be involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Roz, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
Located on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, the Gaza Strip could have become the Singapore of the Middle East. However, the people of Gaza chose the Hamas terror group to rule over them, rather than choosing to live alongside Israel in peace. In June of 2006, Palestinian terrorists infiltrated Israel through a tunnel in an unprovoked cross-border raid. 19-year-old Gilad Shalit was captured and forced into Gaza through a tunnel. He was held hostage for 5 years. On October 18, 2011, Israel negotiated the release of Gilad Shalit in exchange for freeing 1,027 jailed Palestinian terrorists. One of them was terror mastermind Yahya Sinwar, who had been given 4 life sentences for the murder of 2 Israeli police officers and the execution of 4 Arabs whom he accused of collaborating with the Jewish state. Upon his return to the Gaza Strip, Sinwar was hailed as a Palestinian hero. He was named the leader of the Hamas terror group and began planning the October 7th genocide. Sinwar directed the terror group to divert both its Iranian funding as well as the international aid it receives into expanding the massive underground network of tunnels, leaving the civilian population destitute and hungry.
Hamas has built one of the most sophisticated tunnel systems on the planet, using hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign aid and direct financing from Iran to achieve its terror goals. These terror tunnels are found under schools, hospitals, and UNRWA facilities, and were built with one goal in mind: to be used as staging points to kill as many Jews as possible.
While the residents of Gaza lived in harsh conditions without proper water and sewage systems, Hamas terrorists were building an underground haven equipped with all of the amenities that Gazan civilians lacked. The IDF believes that Hamas confiscated more than 6,000 tons of concrete and 1,800 tons of steel to construct its Gaza terror tunnel network. These materials could have been used to build homes and infrastructure for Gazan residents, but instead Hamas diverted international aid and resources intended to better the lives of the Gazan people to build up their underground terrorist hideout. The tunnel network of Hamas is more intricate than the New York City subway system. Engineering experts with the Israeli army estimate that this underground city of terror could stretch up to 450 miles long. There are more than 5,700 separate shafts leading from private Arab homes, stores, schools, hospitals, and facilities belonging to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency into the tunnels. The Israel Defense Forces have long suspected that the Iranian-backed terror group was intentionally constructing tunnels underneath civilian locations, knowing that the Israeli army would do everything in its power to avoid harming innocent men, women, and children. Now that the IDF is on the ground in the Gaza Strip, military analysts have been able to prove that the tunnels are mainly built underneath civilian safe havens, such as hospitals, schools, and mosques. The IDF also discovered a highly sophisticated data center under the Gaza headquarters of UNRWA. This advanced underground installation was equipped with sophisticated computer hardware, including rooms where Hamas hackers operated massive servers fueled by industrial power banks. The tunnels were built with electricity, ventilation, and high-speed internet. The IDF also found facilities equipped to manufacture and store weapons, as well as living quarters for the terrorists themselves. Some more advanced tunnels were equipped with creature comforts designed specifically for senior Hamas leaders and their families, while others were intentionally sparse. They were used to hold hostages. Some of the tunnels are large enough for vehicles to transport weapons and captives leading from under the Gaza Strip all the way up to and even inside the borders of Israel and Egypt. From the outset of the Israeli Army's Operation Iron Swords, the military understood that the Gaza tunnel system was one of the biggest challenges it would face in the fight to destroy Hamas and to rescue the 250 hostages held inside the tunnels. The plan is to continue this campaign until all of the hostages are recovered and the Hamas terrorists are forced above ground. Hamas terrorists took the supplies intended to build a thriving community and poured all of its resources underground to facilitate its campaign of murder and terror. Now, the only hope for the residents of Gaza is the complete removal of Hamas, as well as the destruction of the terror tunnel network that it built. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Dear friends, I'm coming to you from the Gaza envelope, from Kibbutz Be'eri, the place that probably was worst hit by those atrocities of October 7. 10% of the population of this kibbutz were killed, mutilated, raped, and it was a day where the president of Israel said it was the darkest day in the history of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. What we saw on October 7 was not just a military conflict that was unfolding, but it was a vicious, demonic attack that targeted mainly civilians that were living here in this community. Kibbutz Be'eri was one of the most peaceful places in Israel. During most of the year, young families enjoyed living here and raising their children in that community. On October 7, everything was changed. Now, the Word of God tells us that the battle in which we are engaging, it is not a battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers in the heavenly places. And what we have seen in Kibbutz Be'eri was a demonic manifestation of the spirit of Amalek. It was hitting people that were peace-loving residents of this community, like the following story.
כן, הבית הזה גרה פה ויויאן, שהייתה פעילת שלום, שבאה מקנדה, אין יותר ממנה, הייתה מסיעה, אנשים עד לעזה, היו אוכלים אצלה, שותים, ופה היא מצאה את מותה. פשוט לא שרפו לה את הבית ורצחו אותה. ומה שאני אומר, חמאס, דאעש, נאצים, הם לא בוחלים, אין חברים. הם רוצים להרוג את כל היהודים ואת כל הנוצרים בעולם, זה האמונה שלהם וזה מה שהם רוצים.
What you hear here, it's a rebirth of the spirit of Amalek in our time. I don't think this spirit of Amalek, of hating the Jews, wanting to annihilate the Jewish people, were more powerful manifested than on October 7. I want to call upon our prayer partners from around the world to understand, even though you see the physical destruction of that house, we are not waging a physical war. Our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against demonic powers that are operating over there in Gaza with organizations like Hamas, like Islamic Jihad, that have one target: to annihilate the Jewish people. This spirit needs to be addressed in prayer. We need you to speak out to your communities about the atrocities that were taking place here in this land. And it's a time where the church needs to wake up, where they need to stand up. Not only confessions are enough today, where we say we love Israel, but actions are needed. Vivian's story showed us that this is indeed a demonic force that was unleashed, that is operating still inside Gaza today. Israel needs to deal with that, of course, in a military means, but we need Christians around the world who are facing that challenge of Amalek, of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred that is operating there, not only here in this region of the Middle East, but it is seen also today on the streets of Europe and the streets even of America, and even on some of the most liberal campuses in the world. Today we need to pray for Israel like never before. I'm reminded in these days on the story of Exodus chapter 17, on the story of Amalek as they viciously attacked the Jewish people. It was a spiritual battle that on the one side it was fought on the ground with Joshua and his army. At the same time, Moses and Aaron and Hur were on the mountain praying and interceding for the people of Israel. I want to tell you that this is the day when the church needs to stand with Israel, like Moses, like Aaron, like Hur, on the mountain to pray for a clear victory of Israel against those forces of darkness. Today, a praying church is being needed around the world. Please join our various prayer initiatives, either the Global Prayer Gathering, the Rosh Chodesh Prayer, a 24/7 campaign. Israel needs today your prayer more than ever. Thank you so much for standing with us, and I look forward to see you and to welcome you in one of our prayer meetings. God bless you here from the envelope of Gaza.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.